If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank LOTERIZO and Jack HIRSCH. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank LOTERIZO and Jack HIRSCH.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank LOTERIZO, former somewhat writer, tried to be full-time observer, joined by Jack HIRSCH, former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. Jack, what's that say? What's that hat say?
Yeah, I got this a FIFA World Cup cap because there was 75% off. You see, I'm not like you, LOTERIZO, at the beginning of a big tournament. You pick up all your goods when they're way overpriced. I wait for the tournament to be over, like a big fight. You would pick up all the gear, the shirts, the this, the that, and feel good about yourself. And then a few weeks later, it'll be reduced to practically nothing, but you can't wait. You have that impulse behavior. I waited. I got my FIFA cap at 75% off.
I remember after going to see Allie and Holmes on closed circuit at the Spectrum, when we were leaving, I went with a couple of friends, and when we're leaving, they were selling pictures of Allie, just profile pictures of Allie for $1 each, and I bought 5.
It would have been a good. Oh, okay, there you go. But you know what? Since we mentioned soccer, I mentioned in a moment ago. I think about 3 days after Ali beat Shavers, he went to the Meadowlands because it was Pele's farewell game at the Meadowlands. Right. And what I remember about that afternoon wasn't the game itself. I remember the way it was raining. It was just raining. Maybe tears were coming down from up there. But it was a great moment to see these iconic athletes like Ali and Pele. And no matter how big a boxer we have in the future, no matter how great they are, we might never get anyone as iconic as Ali again. Iconic. I'm not saying greater fighter, not iconic. In the same way with soccer, as great as these guys are, like Lionel Messi, so on, I don't know whether you can get anyone as iconic as Pele was. If you want to
Well, soccer's a lot bigger now, Jack, in America than it was during Pele's time.
Well, pretty soon we're going to have on Bobby, not in a few minutes, we're going to have on Bobby Cassidy Jr., and he's going to be talking about the book he wrote on his dad, the well-known middleweight, the past Bobby Cassidy Sr. But I just want to say a word about the Tyson Fury-Anthony Joshua fight. What's going on with the negotiations? Apparently, it's going to wind up at Madison Square Garden in November. For me, that's good. That's good. I get to the Garden quick, and I'll probably get credentialed for that fight. So for me, it's like, wow, I can't believe it. But the fight belongs in the UK. I'm getting tired of Eddie Hearn covering his tracks. The way he's talking, we're holding out for it to be in the UK. We have it on the contract, this. Bottom line, and he says we're contracted to the UK, so they have to change the terms of the contract if it's going to be at the Garden. They're full of it. If they held out the fighters, if Anthony Joshua refused to fight, if he refused to fight outside of the UK, the fight will wind up in the UK. Let the fight not take place then. Don't give me this, you're looking out for the fans. Or I have an alternative, Frank. What do you think of this? Let Eddie Hearn get more money. Let him get millions more, and then give it back to the fans. Get hotel rooms. Set up 100 hotel rooms for British fans, and he picks up the tab with the extra money that was given to Joshua.
Jack, I don't know what to say. You know how I feel about the fight, but it just goes to show you one thing. Look, I beat up on this sport a lot lately, and I have lost my zeal for it in a lot of ways. But you know something? The fact that a fight, as Joe Bergman says, it's at least 5 years overdue. He says 8, and I'm not going to dispute that. the fact that there could be so much interest in it because you have guys that have marquee names, which just goes to show how this sport could come back if guys would fight and they would give the fans a reason to like them, to come and see them, to take an interest in them. Because look, Joshua and Fury are, as many people say, on the back nine. They're way back there. But the fact that the two names can be paired together and there will be such interest in the fight, and Madison Square Garden will be probably sold out that night because of it.
And the British fans are going to make the trip to New York.
And they're going to come, you're right, because they've been waiting a long time.
Shame on them. I think it's a good fight for New York fans to show up, and I hope they sell the Garden out. I'm encouraging fans around the New York area to go to the fight and sell the Garden out. I'm encouraging that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying stay away, just the opposite. But if I'm a
But Jack, if they said to you, why should we go to the fight, what would you say? What would you say? What's the reason to go to the fight? Because it's Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury? It means nothing.
No, it's big names. I mean, we're dealing with names. And if you look at what both guys have accomplished in their career to date, you'll agree they've accomplished more than Ryan Garcia and Conor Benn, which is going to be considered a big fight. Would you agree with me on that? They've accomplished.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'd be a fool not to, but it's like, what does it mean today? It doesn't prove who would have won if they were at their best. It's who has more left right now, and we don't really know the answer to that. I'd like Fury to win all along, but he could lose. But it's like, what does it mean in that big picture? Just to say that I was there the night that Joshua and Fury fought at the Garden?
No, it's still an intriguing fight because I'm picking Joshua. You're picking Fury. So that gives it kind of like that balance. There's the element of doubt. I could see Fury winning, absolutely. Joshua's more of a wild card than Fury. You don't know what Anthony Joshua you're going to get. You might get an explosive Anthony Joshua who's going to nail Fury and be able to put him out. You might get a very flawed Anthony Joshua who's going to get stopped in 3 rounds. I mean, we just don't know with him.
I say Fury's going to come after him and try to put some hurt on him. And then if that doesn't work, he's going to slap him and grab him and jab him. And Joshua's going to follow him around and wait for that perfect opportunity to let a right hand go. It's never going to find its target.
Okay. I mean, that could happen. I'm going to tell you, we have him backstage. So I think we can get him on now if he's ready. Bobby Cassidy Jr. So if we could bring Bobby Cassidy Jr. on. Hey, Bobby, how you doing? Bobby, I finished reading the book you wrote on your dad. A great, great book.
Thank you.
I'm not just saying it because you were on the show. Knowing your dad as well. Did you get that photo I sent to you, me and your dad?
No, it kept crashing. I could not open that page.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was
Try
a special photo.
Try to email it to me.
I'll do that. It was a special photo because it was taken outside of Sunnyside Gardens when we had honored him. Frank, you had in Philadelphia your Blue Horizon, a legendary arena. We counted in New York with Sunnyside Gardens, and Bobby Cassidy Sr. was the king of Sunnyside Gardens. I mean, he fought there, correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby, 25 times,
Yep.
22 wins, no losses, 3 draws.
He did have one loss there. One loss, yeah.
One loss. What was his exact record?
Oh boy, it was well, I know the loss was to Billy Collins, a split decision loss, and my father's like 14th pro fight. And
well, your dad will say he never really lost there, the split decision he would have said.
Yeah.
But you talk about the way boxing has changed, and myself and Frank, talked about it a lot. And for a fighter as popular as your dad, and we're going to talk about other elements of his private life and about the book, not just his career, he was really hard done. It's hard to believe he was never given a shot at a world title. For one, he earned a shot at a world title, and he was a very popular, charismatic fighter on top of it. But once in a while, for whatever reason, things slipped through the cracks. And that's something that always haunted him, correct? Never being given a shot at the title.
Yeah, that bothered him till the day he died. He would say, I don't know if I would have won it, but I know I deserve the shot. And he was rated for probably he boxed from 1963 to 1980. He was rated usually somewhere in the top 10 from 67 on. And just to never get a title fight really, really stung him.
You start the book, and I recommend highly people to get it. You start the book with a fascinating chapter about when he fought Luis Rodriguez.
Yeah.
He lost the split decision, and arguably that was the most heartbreaking loss of his career because he knew he was in with a great fighter.
Yeah.
Even though Rodriguez wasn't in the Hall of Fame yet, he knew that was a Hall of Fame caliber fighter.
Yeah.
And he put it all on the line and loses a split decision. And you write about Muhammad Ali coming into his dressing room. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating moment.
In Miami Beach, it took place.
It was in Miami Beach, and my father had been to Miami a few times, had fought down there a handful of times. At one point, there was a little talk with him and Angelo. Maybe they were going to work together. So he trained down there, and like I said, fought down there a handful of times. Anyway, the Luis Rodriguez fight was his biggest fight, no question about it, at that time of his life. Anyway, and he really loved Luis Rodriguez. He used to call him my idol. He used to love watching him on TV. We'd go to the Garden to see him fight. So this is a chance of a lifetime for him. And he drops him in the first round, like really hurts him bad. He gets up, finishes the round, and then of course finishes the fight. The decision was booed in the arena, and which is saying something, right? Luis Rodriguez was a favorite down there. He fought, like my dad fought at Sunnyside all those times. Luis Rodriguez fought at Miami Beach Auditorium like over 30 times. Yeah. And so the fans booed the decision. And one of the papers, I don't think it was the Herald, but I think it was a paper called the Miami Beach Sun, called for an investigation into the fight.
Wow.
So there's a picture. His story revolves around two pictures, but the one picture that was most poignant to me was the one that's early in the book, right after that chapter. He was as despondent as you can be in the dressing room, just completely disgusted with life, disgusted with boxing. I'm going to show you the picture, right? I mean, if you guys can see it.
Yeah, it's in the book there, yeah.
Yeah, he is just... like I said, disgusted with the sport of boxing, and he's not speaking to anybody. He's not talking to anybody. But a few minutes later, now he'd gotten a little friendly with Ali training at the Fifth Street Gym, and nothing major, a nod, hello, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But Ali comes into the dressing room after the fight and, basically says, you won that fight, kid, hang in there. You'll be champ someday. Just really, really classy move for Ali.
And Rodriguez was one of Ali's buddies too.
Correct.
And idols growing up.
Yes, which made it
even more meaningful.
Right, which made that moment even more meaningful. Correct. And he happened to have these photos of himself, and he takes out two photos and he writes, to Robbie, your daddy is the greatest, Muhammad Ali, and then he writes one to my brother Chris. Your daddy is the greatest. Which is such a cool thing to say, right? Your daddy is the greatest, And so he sent them home with those photos. And it was quite a moment for him, and something that he never forgot, something that I never forgot. So,
Bobby, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Was his mindset perhaps that if he wins that decision, that he gets a shot at Monzon, who was the champ then? Was there a champ? Was that any talk of that if he got past Rodriguez?
Well, I don't know if there was talk of that, but I do know that at the time, Rodriguez was either the third rated middleweight in the world. So that puts him, he wins that fight, that puts him right in the mix.
Well, I got to tell you that Frank, the tough fights he took. And also you mentioned Rodriguez being Ali's buddy. When he fought Rodriguez, this was January 26, 1971. This was about 7 weeks before
the fight of the century.
Yeah.
Just the idea that Ali would be attending another fight show, because he was buddies with Luis Rodriguez.
Yes.
But
So that
Jack,
had
Ali
fun.
trained for that fight in Miami.
Yeah, I know, but
Ali, so he was there.
yeah, and but also, I mean, just looking at it, after that heartbreaking loss to Rodriguez, 3 months later in New York, he beat Don Fulmer, perennial middleweight contender. I mean, that was a big win. Wasn't that the fight where they had to wear shirts?
Yes, yeah. My father refused to wear it. I still have that shirt, by the way. They were supposed to wear shirts. My father refused to wear it, never went in the ring with it on. Don Fulmer wore it in the ring. And then after the 4th round, took it off. He was like, I'm not wearing, it was like too sweaty. He felt it restricting him. It was like a basketball shirt. It was a tank top. So yeah, you're right though. That
what was the sense? What was the logic behind it? It wasn't adding to boxer safety. I mean, what was the logic?
It was strictly publicity. They thought if they thought that, if you put him on t-shirt with those tank tops in different colors and they put the name on the back, it said Cassidy on the back and the other one said Fulmer. They thought it was really just to try to make it, more of a fan-friendly thing. That's really what it was all about.
And a few months after that, he fought, and I was at that fight against Rodrigo Valdez.
Yeah.
And Valdez, quite honestly, for the most part, dominated the fight. But there was one big round, one big moment where he hurt Valdez and had him in serious trouble, and the crowd was all up. Yeah. And he hurt Valdez in a way that, other great fighters like Carlos Monzon never did.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
Jack, that's pretty big though, because when you can go with Rodriguez like that, I mean, if you take Monzon out, Rodriguez is probably the second best middleweight of the 70s.
Right, you mean Valdez, Rodrigo Valdez.
I'm sorry, Rodrigo Valdez, right.
Yeah.
Valdez is probably, after Monzon, would probably be, at least if someone asked me, I would say that he was the second best middleweight of the 70s.
Yeah,
and he was young there too.
Yeah, it was young.
I want to get to the beginning. After that, I did get to the first chapter, but the real beginning of the book is Bobby Cassidy Sr.'s childhood. He had a rough upbringing.
Yeah,
I mean, I've known you, Junior, for a lot of years, and you're as normal as could be, as far as I, could detect. But with what you were through to an extent yourself, I mean, I actually remember when you first started covering the fights in the media, and you sat next to me, I think the first night, and of course, like everyone else, I mentioned your father.
Yeah.
It's so much for you getting your own identity.
Yeah.
I think this was something like 1989.
Yes.
The first time at the Felt Forum.
Yeah.
For one of the shows. But your dad, he was abused by a stepfather. But what made it worse, his own mother was completely indifferent to him getting abused, completely indifferent. If anything, she was a co-conspirator against him, if anything. And I mean, that had to hurt. I mean, at least if he had semi-support from his mother, it would help. And to live under those conditions. And one of the parts that I enjoyed when reading about the abuse, not the abuse itself, is when your dad finally cracked and put a beating on his stepfather. I was hoping, I was hoping to just break his jaw. I mean, just put him out something bad. But supposedly after he put a beating on your stepfather, I guess things changed a little bit around the household. I'm surprised he wasn't kicked out.
Yeah, I mean, well, he was still young. I think he was 14, I think it said in the book. But yeah, I mean, it completely changed. And I put it in the book, and the line he always used to say, and he's told me these stories for years and years and years. I have multiple audio recordings of my dad, because we talked about this book for probably 15 years, potentially doing this book. Sadly, it didn't get done until after he passed, but he always said, it was like 1,000 beatings to one. He felt like ripped off in a way, like I only got one good beating in. But I think it's true to most bullies and most abusive people that they're really cowards deep down inside. And the fact that my father had to chase him down the hallway and he was screaming, crying for help and telling the mom to call the cops, to me, that's just as fitting as if he broke his jaw, you know, because that's really what the man was. And
He humiliated him.
Yeah, he humiliated him. Yep. And you're right, Jack. He told me, and as I wrote it in the book, he said, I hated my mother more than him because she allowed it to happen.
Yeah. And
that was a different day, though, where that wasn't out in the open like it is today. Not 100%. Making an excuse, but back then, people that was just like, she probably was just so bugged out, didn't know how to handle it.
Well, she was a drunk. They were both drunks, and his real father was a drunk who he didn't meet until when he was 20 years old, fighting at Sunnyside Garden or something. The guy just showed up. So yeah, but you're right. No one talked about it. No, that stuff never left the home. But they were both alcoholics, and so was his real father. So it was not. He didn't have much of a shot.
How did he get into boxing, Bobby? What led your father to box?
Yeah, so he that moment, right, when he turned the tables on his stepfather, it was kind of liberating for him. And he was a kid up until that point who lacked confidence. He had no self-esteem. No one took an interest in him. He didn't play other sports like kids play sports. He tried to play baseball once. That didn't go well because he didn't have anyone to have a catch with. No one was teaching him how to play. So, but he realized after that moment was that, hey, I could, I like fighting. This is liberating for me. This is exciting.
I got hands.
Yeah. So he started fighting, and he fought all the time. And up until, fast forward through high school, and he got into all kinds of fights and all kinds of trouble. And a judge finally said to him, if I see you again, you're going to jail, you better go to a boxing gym. And sure enough, he did. And
how old was he when that happened?
He was 17 when that happened, and he ended up turning pro about a year and a half later with, as Jack said, no amateur fights. He was going to go in the Golden Gloves, and the Daily News went on strike in 1963. And he basically said, I got to do this. You can't, you have to get me. His trainer was Johnny Sulo, who was an old time legend.
Yeah, really had Walter Seeley. Yes, I remember.
Had a lot of guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Johnny Sulo was the cut man for Benny Perret the night he was killed. Yeah. So my father's like, listen, you got to get me a fight. And so he just turned pro.
Well, Teddy Brenner wasn't that high on your father. It's as if he didn't even want to use him. He called him, 1,000,000 to 1 shot to do anything.
Yeah.
Teddy Brenner. But your father was an immediate crowd pleaser, and he became a celebrity in the neighborhood. You being Bobby Cassidy's son had a certain amount of status to it. Even when you were older, he'd go to your ball games or something, and just the idea people would see him, and it was like, it was a real popular guy. He never lost his popularity even after he retired. I mean, I didn't know him at all when he fought at all. I knew him afterwards when he was a trainer later on, and I had a great bond with him. I could joke around, I could tease him, and he would laugh. But sometimes when someone feels someone else is non-threatening, you can kind of joke with them a little bit more, I feel. And that's how I think he looked at me, because I was completely non-threatening, so he could get a kick out of me joking back and forth with him. But it's early.
Like you, Jack, I don't remember him when he fought. I remember the name, though, because I was very young then. And I remember the name, and just from reading, the articles in Ring and what have you, I just remember getting the impression, and this could be totally wrong, and you guys could jump all over me, but I remember thinking of him as sort of like being a poor man's Jerry Quarry or a middleweight Jerry Quarry, that type of guy that could go with everybody, but didn't always get the breaks. Is that somewhat in the ballpark?
Well, my own opinion, and Bobby, you might disagree. He was a little short of elite as a fighter, but on a given day, he could upset an elite fighter. He was good enough to upset an elite fighter on a given day. I think, like Jerry Quarry,
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. One of my father's best friends would say that to him for years. Like he's like, you weren't a great fighter, but you were just underneath that. but on any given night you could beat anybody. It was that kind of and I think that's fair. And I think my father was very proud of that. I mean, you talk about the 60s and 70s, the guys that he fought in the era that he fought in, and he certainly would take that. I mean, a lot of it wasn't until like 73, 74 that the titles actually split. So there's only one champ in every division at that time. And, one of his big fights that he didn't get the decision on was Gypsy Joe Harris. I mean, that was, if you look at the clips and I talk about it in the book, I mean, the AP scored that fight a draw. I mean, he dropped Gypsy Joe Harris in the 9th round, and the fight was in Philly. He was not going to get a decision in Philly. So, that was kind of in a lot of ways, for a big stretch there, that was the story of his life. He was fighting other guys in their hometowns, and, he was.
Yeah. But I'm going to tell you, there was only one fight he had where I was real disappointed in him, because there wasn't the real him that showed up. And I think you'll know the fight that I'm referring to. He still had enough in the tank, and he was fighting the chief support to Ali Frazier 2 at Madison Square Garden. Got stopped by Jorge Ahumada in 3 rounds. He just wasn't there that night. What happened to him? He was coming off a victory over Jimmy Dupree, a perennial light heavyweight top contender, and he just
who was an outstanding light heavyweight.
Yeah,
Ahumada was, but that wasn't.
No, I meant Dupree was outstanding. Humada ended up fighting Foster to a draw.
Right, exactly. So you just beaten Jimmy Dupree before, and he's in the big stage. Ali Frazier, the big crowd, and it. That gutted me.
Yeah,
I can imagine what it did to him.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that was the culmination of his drinking. And look, I'm not going to sit here and try to make excuses for him, and because Ahumada was a great fighter. And Frank, you're right. In the next fight, he drew with Bob Foster. He had some great fights with John Conte.
Yeah.
But that was the title elimination fight. That was whoever won was going to fight Bob Foster. But my father was drinking a lot. I mean, the drinking in his life had reached a crescendo at that point. My parents had just gotten divorced. And I will tell you this, and I wrote it in the book, and we actually wrote the off-Broadway play based on this fight. After that night, right, he got to the garden that night, and he didn't have his robe. He was looking around the dressing room. He was like, "Where's my robe?" And it was home. It was sitting in the closet in Levittown. But after that night, he went on a drinking binge for about the next month and a half, and just terrible drinking binge, knocking guys out in bars, knocking out bouncers. He wakes up one morning. He gets into a fight in a bar, knocks about 3 guys out, and wakes up in someone's backyard at 5 o'clock in the morning. Had no idea what happened. The cops chased him out of the bar, and he realized that day he actually made a promise to me and my brother that I will never drink again. And he literally got down on his knees in our home in Levittown and begged God, please give me the strength never to drink. He never drank another day in his life. Alcohol never crossed his lips again. And that was in 1974. He just died a couple of years ago. So the way I talk about the Ahumada fight was, it was a devastating loss. But what happened after that was the biggest win of his life, because he stopped drinking. I mean, he would have been dead or in jail or something.
Yeah, he lived life in the fast lane, even after, and you were a part of it unwillingly. But yeah, I mean, you kind of went along with the wave. He was your dad, so you would follow as a loyal son.
Yeah,
and you wouldn't feel comfortable with the things that he was involved with. He was the equivalent, correct me if I'm wrong, like Gazzo in the movie Rocky, in the way. Not as smooth as Gazzo, not as smooth. Gazzo
no one is. Smooth. No one was.
Your dad, no one's as smooth as Gazzo. It was more like Rocky Balboa, your dad, in personality. Yeah. And by the way, for those who don't know, Bobby Cassidy Sr. was in the movie Rocky. He was the police officer when Paulie tries to get in the ring. Burt Young, he stops Paulie from getting in. In real life, Burt Young, a la Paulie, got Bobby Cassidy that part.
Yes.
As a police officer. So that was pretty cool,
to have
friends, that. Yeah. But he would send you to pick up and collect the money, not to roughhouse anyone, because he knew that they would willingly give you the money. He didn't think you were going to get into physical altercations. They'll give you the money, you come and you collect it, but you didn't feel comfortable doing that. As you mentioned in the book, but it
was so when it started, and just for context, after my father's career, he had hung around wise guys a lot. He was around them when he was fighting. He would, take some bets here and there or help people collect money. So that was just his life, that's just, the people he hung out with. And so when he retired, he just kind of stepped into that a little more, and he ended up, taking bets and lending money. And he was, aligned with some wise guys. And so at one point, he basically, I'm about 16, 17 now. And first it started off with, there was an OTB down the block from our house, and he would send me down there and put in some bets for him, and, some horse racing bets. And I would run, right? It was about a quarter mile away, and I was training for the high school football season. So I'd run there, run back, almost do like a quarter mile sprint. I was doing that like 6-7 times a day. So I was getting in great shape. Right? So, but then as I got a little older and I got a driver's license, it became, hey, stop by this deli and this guy's going to give you an envelope. And so I didn't really know at first what it was. And then as I got older, I started figuring out what was happening here. To Jack's point, he wasn't sending me into situations where a guy was going to give me a hard time or he took care of those. But, that was his life for a few years after boxing. And I started to question it the older I got. And I was very, one of the differences I think between the two of us, and not that my father wasn't a sympathetic and good-natured person, but I started really feeling bad for these guys. Like they're, they have $1,000 loan and all they can pay is the juice on it every week for weeks and weeks. I mean, they're not even making any progress on the principal. And I just started feeling bad for these guys. And, it was just, and I would tell that to him, and he's like, nah, don't worry about it. You just got to do it. And of course it was my dad. If he was a shoemaker, I would have done the same thing. If he was a butcher, I would have done the same thing. That's what he was doing. I was his oldest son. He asked me to help him, and I did.
That's what I meant. Your brother, Chris, well-known photographer, successful, good guy. Yeah, I get the feeling your younger brother, Chris, he didn't make the same demands of. Somehow he looked at you differently. Is that true? I mean, you kind of hinted that in the book. Like, yeah. I don't think you weren't resentful about it, but it's like Chris could make him laugh. With you, it was more, he loved you the same, but it was more like business. You were the older, supposedly more mature one who expected to take care of things.
Yeah, 100%, Jack. And first of all, Chris and I were blessed to have the parents we had, both of them. We were extremely lucky. But I was the older son, right? So I got asked to do the things. Chris was he's to this day is really funny, and he would always make my dad laugh, and they just had a little bit of a different relationship. But I was older, so I got asked to do these things.
Now, Frank, cut in at any time you want if you have anything you have to say.
I didn't get the book yet, so I can't add much regarding the book. So I'll stick to the boxing. Go ahead, Jack.
You were I wasn't aware. You were a pretty good athlete. You went to CW Post?
Went to Post, yeah.
And you played with, players. I guess at the end of the day, they passed you slightly. One of your buddies was David Justice's roommate, in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
That too. And you had a great camaraderie. But your dad used to go to all the games. I mean, he's a big Yankee fan, right?
Yeah.
And he would be a voice at the games, watching it there. I don't know. And even though I'm sure you loved having the parental support, it could be a little difficult at times because he could be your biggest supporter or your worst critic.
Yeah.
A combination of both.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, look, obviously the support was amazing. But he wasn't shy about speaking what he said, whether that was directly to me or to a coach or whoever it was. I mean, and listen, for the most part, I think every coach I ever had would say my father was a great parent for the team, but there were some times he would get a little carried away. So he
Did he ever
was.
say threaten an umpire? Were they about to fight or what?
No, I'll tell you a funny story though, and I see the note here. It's available. The book is on Amazon.com. I saw someone leave a note there, and I've been seeing the notes pop in.
Great book.
Thank you so much, everyone, leaving these little messages on the screen. And yes, it's Amazon.com. But I'll tell you a funny story. It's in the book. He used to sit in high school basketball. He would sit in the first row next to the cheerleaders, right? He always sat as close as he possibly could to the field or the court or wherever it was. And so I was a point guard, and my dad didn't know the nuances of basketball. And my job was really to pass the ball and set up the plays and run the offense. And I would score sometimes, but I never scored enough to his liking. And so he would always say to me, like, you got to shoot more. You got to shoot more. And I'd be coming down the court and he'd be saying, shoot. And I'd be like, and I'm trying to ignore him. I'm trying to block it out. And it was like anyone you see that movie Bull Meacham, right? With the great Santini, right? When it's a great Robert Duvall movie. He has that scene in the basketball gym where he starts yelling at the refs and everything. Anyway, it was a little bit like that if anyone knows the movie. But so he was really super involved. And one game, right? It was a tough game, and I wasn't a demonstrative person. You know me, I'm pretty quiet. Yeah. And there was a foul called on the play, and I just kind of redirected the ball, like just tapped it in a different direction, like towards somebody else. And the ref hit me with a tee, right? And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I didn't say anything. I just walked away. But my father starts to realize what's going on, and he's looking at me. He goes, did he give you a tee? He's pointing, and I'm like, so I thought for a second, I'm like, all right, I could just let this go and not say anything. But I was so upset that the guy gave me a tee. I'm like, yeah, he teed me up. And my father he got up out of that seat and he paced him the length of the court the entire time, just like talking at the guy. And the guy was like waving him off and all this stuff. So then at halftime, all my coaches and gym teachers told the guy who he was. He was like, listen, be smart. Don't antagonize this guy because you might not walk out of here if you do. And the guy didn't blow the whistle for the entire second half of the game. So he could impact the game if he wanted to.
Yeah.
He didn't.
That is a great story.
Yeah.
That is a great story.
He didn't.
Bobby, let me ask you this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Being you were so tight with your father, did you ever box? Did you ever want to box? And how would he have felt, or did he feel about you perhaps becoming a fighter?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to box in the worst way, and he forbid it. He would not let me or Chris fight. He encouraged us to play any sport we wanted to play. We could never fight. He would, when I was a kid, he taught us the basics, jab, right hand. He even would take me down to this kind of PAL gym once in a while where there was, but it was never going to be an option for me as I got older and as I got more competitive. And I wanted to do it. I mean, I wanted to follow in his footsteps in the worst way. And, as we talked about, he had some trouble and he went to jail. And I was out of college at that time. I was done playing baseball, and I was like, you know what? Here's my chance. What's he going to say now? He can't stop me, right? So I go to the Westbury boxing gym, and Pete Brodsky was the trainer, and Pete was a really good friend of my dad's. And he's like, Robbie. They all call me Robbie. Everyone who knows me for a long time calls me Robbie. He's like, Robbie, get out of here. He's like, your father's going to be so mad at me. And I'm like, Pete, I'm going to be a journalist. This is great experience for me. I want to learn about the sport. So time goes on. He lets me start working out, and I'm hitting the bag, and I'm training with guys down there, and I'm loving it. I'm having the greatest time. And then at home, I'm sparring in the basement with one of my buddies, thinking, okay, I'm going to convince Pete. And I keep trying. And I'm like, Pete, I got to really know what it's like to get hit and blah, blah, blah. Long story short, I did it for a little while. I'm really glad I did it. It helped me understand boxing, helped me understand the sport. Pete, he's like, you're going to get me killed. And then my father, when he found out, he's like, oh, how can you do this without me? And I'm like, I'm like, Dad, you were never going to let me do it, you know? So, but anyway.
What were his reasons? Just because of the way how the sports run, and the odds of making it are long, and just it's a dirty business, and he didn't want you involved in something like that?
Both, actually, two parts of it. That for sure, how tough the business was. But he always said I would never be able to watch someone hit you or your brother. I couldn't physically restrain myself from watching someone hit you or your brother.
It's like he had a premonition, you know, when he passed away. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, dementia was the main reason. Yeah. You know, and oddly enough, I remember having a conversation with him about dementia when he was long retired, but long before he passed away, you know, getting hit too much, what it could affect. And all I remember about the conversation really I had was he said, let's say your short-term memory is affected. So what? That was his thing. Who cares? So what? Short-term memory. But that's what it is. That's what the onset more. You forget things you did 10 minutes ago, but are going to remember maybe things that 10 years ago.
Right.
You know, what happened. And, but, you know, there was vindication in his boxing career. Not that he needed vindication, but there were championships to be won as a trainer, you know, with Donnie Lalonde, Lonnie Bradley. He got inducted into the New York State Boxing Hall of Fame as a fighter, and it means a lot more to be as a fighter, as a non-fighter. I don't even compare the two. You know, you're non-fighters. Yes, it doesn't compare. It doesn't compare to the fighters. You know, anything you do as a journalist just doesn't to me.
Right.
But I didn't realize how close he was with Donnie Lalonde.
They were very close.
Effect that he had on Donnie Lalonde.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things about Donnie. I mean, you know, Donnie was an abused child too, so they really, really bonded. They had a great relationship, very, very close relationship. And they just, you know, they bonded over that a similar past, you know, similar life experiences. But Donnie was such a smart, educated fighter. He was like really cerebral, and he just loved talking strategy with my father. They would go over strategies and different things. And so they really saw boxing on the same level, you know, and, you know, and so Donnie, they really enjoyed each other's company, and he was very close with Lonnie Bradley too. You know, Lonnie was the other champ that he trained. And
well, Lonnie, you once wrote that when your dad says, I have 3 sons, you know, Chris, Robbie, and Lonnie.
Yeah.
You didn't resent it in Chris at all, because that's how, you know, you saw how close he was with Lonnie, and it kind of warmed your heart. The nice effect Lonnie would have on your dad.
Oh, 100%. You know, yeah. I mean, Lonnie was just part of the family. To this day, he's part of the family. Just a great guy. And I should say that my father loved all the guys that he trained with. You know, there's that saying, Jack, you probably heard it: don't fall in love with your fighter, because they're going to break your heart. And he never really had that experience as a trainer. He just bonded with all of them, you know, so many guys that he trained over the years. And it was just a special time for him. And you're right, somewhat of a vindication to take 2 guys to the world title. He was very proud of that. And both Lonnie and Donnie Lalonde said it to him, like, this part of this is for you, you know, this belt's for you too. And he trained Peggy Donovan Ward. The first year they had women in the Golden Gloves, he trained her, and she won the title. So you know, he enjoyed his training.
Was he a fan up until the end? Was he a big? They followed it.
He started to get.
He stopped training.
He started to lose interest in it. You know, he started. I mean, we always watched the big fights, but once he stopped training guys, he couldn't tell you the day-to-day. You know, who was the 8th ranked middleweight, where he would know it cold. He wouldn't know that stuff. You know, he started to lose interest in it.
I don't think he really feared any opponent, but there was one potential opponent he would have been very apprehensive to go against, because we'd had discussions and he'd be raving about Bob Foster being the greatest light heavyweight champion ever. And Foster was a murderous puncher. So I don't think that was a matchup he would have taken it a title shot, but he would have gone for broke, I think, in the beginning. He kind of, I think, would have known, if I'm going to be, I'm not going to wait a few rounds and see what I can do the way this guy punches. Yeah. So I think it would have been a mountain to climb. I mean, that wouldn't have been the best matchup, but you never, but you could always speculate, had he been in with a Victor Galindez, what he may have done. I mean, fights like that, I'm not saying he would have won it, but those were like winnable fights. But we're talking about Bob Foster, one of the greatest light heavyweight champions in history here.
Yeah, he did. He definitely had a ton of respect for Bob Foster. And you're right, because I've heard him say that. Look, he wasn't afraid of anybody, but he would be like, well, if I had to fight somebody else, that wouldn't be so bad either.
Bob Foster, he would be calling out getting a shot at the title, but he wouldn't be calling out the individual in Foster.
Right. Yeah, I think he was happy that he would have been just as happy to fight John Conte. I think he had a fight. He had a fight with Conte signed, and then Conte broke his hand.
His management throughout his career, it was kind of mixed in a way. Was he? Dennis Rappaport just passed away.
Yeah.
Was he happy with Dennis Rappaport managing him? Was that mixed kind of?
No, he liked Dennis. He liked Dennis a lot. And Dennis only had him for his last couple of fights, but that was the moment. And it wasn't Dennis. I don't know who it was. I don't even know if my father ever knew who it was, but that's the take the bus story where Dennis had a lot of, he was creative. He knew how to get you publicity. He would get, they staged a boycott at Rollway Prison to try to
break into the prison. That's a fun gimmick. Yeah.
That was in almost every newspaper in the country, Jack. Literally, the AP picked that up, and everybody ran that story. If you go onto like newspapers.com and put that in, hundreds of results come up. So that was the mind that Dennis Rappaport had, and my father liked that, right? And so he had one fight. They got him fought twice under Dennis, and then he was going to fight on the Cooney Jimmy Young card in Atlantic City. And
May of 80.
Yeah. And this is real. This was, my father never fought that fight and never fought again. His last fight was January of 1980, but he was going to fight on that card, and Dennis was his manager. And back then, it's kind of hard to believe now, but there was no cell phones, there was no beepers, there was no email, nothing. And I explain all this in the book. So he calls up Dennis's office, because Dennis had a real estate office in Cambria Heights, Queens. And he calls up and he says, look, this is Bobby. I need to talk to Dennis. And he's like, all right, well, we can't reach him. He's in Atlantic City. And obviously, it's a week or so before the fight or whatever. And it was just hard. They couldn't reach him. They were kind of saying, we can't reach him. So I was like, all right, well, I need to know how I'm getting to the fight. And the guy says to him, well, take the bus. And he says, there's buses that run to Atlantic City all the time. And my father's like, take the bus. And the guy didn't really understand, like he was insulting him, And he's like, yeah, it's easy, take the bus. And my father hangs up the phone and he's like, I can't believe this guy just told me to take a gambling bus to my fight. I'm a world rated contender. I'm not taking a bus. So he calls back the next day. He's like, listen, you got to get a hold of Dennis. Tell him, I just want to know what the plan is. Just tell me what the plan is. And the guy's like, well, I told you yesterday, just take the bus. It's easy. And my father hung up the phone, and he was training at the Times Square gym at that time. It was Jimmy Glenn's gym. Jimmy trained him throughout his career.
Yeah, New York. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was the way my father told the story. It was really cinematic in the way that he told the story. If you were ever in the Times Square gym, there was a big window out front that looked over Times Square. And he's like, I looked out the window and I saw a clock across the street, and it said 4 o'clock. And he said, that's it. It's 4 o'clock. I'm done. And he said to Jimmy, cut the gloves off. I'm done. I'm never fighting again. And he gave all his equipment to Mike Marley, who happened to be standing there. He's like, wow. Yeah, take all my stuff. And that's it. He walked away, never fought. I mean, and the message of that story is that the emotional pain was way worse than the physical pain. He was a guy who was a contender, and some guy who knows nothing about boxing keeps telling him to take this gambling bus down to Atlanta.
Bob, for those who don't know, Bobby Cassidy Jr. is just more than senior son. He's one of the top boxing journalist. Tell us what you're doing at Newsday and so on, and tell us a little about yourself.
Oh, thanks, Jack. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I've worked at Newsday the last 30 years. I worked at the New York Post a little bit, and I started out at Ring Magazine. Been a boxing writer at all of those publications. As you guys know, boxing kind of shifts in popularity, and a lot of major newspapers do not have the same interest in boxing as they once did. So as that was happening, I kind of moved my career in a different direction. I was working with the online Newsday's online department, a digital team, and then I went over to the multimedia team, which was a kind of like a blessing for me, because we started making like short documentaries and doing TV packages, and it was opened up a whole new world for me. And so that's what I've been doing the last 15 years. And it's been a great ride at Newsday. Just really blessed to have worked in such a place like that.
Okay. And tell people again how they can get the book, because I read it. I was captivated by it. Great book. Great book.
Before you do that, Bobby, tell us why we want to buy the book. Like, tell the fans that maybe didn't hear of your dad what the hook is of the book and the story.
Yeah, to me, it's about redemption. No matter what happened to my father, he came back, right? He was an abused child. He comes back and makes something out of his life. He becomes an alcoholic. He quits drinking stone cold quits, cold turkey. Goes on to win 16 of his last 17 fights. So, he blows the Ayamata fight because he's drinking, then ends his career winning 16 of his last 17 fights, still ranked in the top 10 as a cruiserweight now. So he redeems himself for that. He goes to prison, right, for the stuff he did on the street. He walks away from that life and then comes out and trains 2 world champions. So he was constantly redeeming himself, constantly finding the better way to do it. He just overcame every obstacle. So to me, he's incredibly inspirational in that way.
And the 4 o'clock story is as good as it gets.
Yeah. And he did have you tap dancing at one point, and I exactly knew what you were thinking when he told you to push to get him in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. And we hear these requests all the time. I get them all the time from people to help them out. I got one the other day, and most of the time they come a little short. It doesn't mean they haven't had great careers. And you told him gently, well, if you could train a couple of more world champions, that could whatever. And you weren't sure whether that would be good enough for him. Even if he got in as a trainer, he may have started arguing to you, I should have gotten in as a fighter. What the heck am I getting in as a trainer instead?
Yeah, it's so true, Jack. And as the dementia kicked in more and more, the reality was he was a bit more detached from reality, right? And listen, I love my father. I love him to death. And you just read the book and
I know when he was alive. I saw the way you always looked out for him all the time. You went out of your way, and you talk about this in the book to a large extent. How painful was it for you to see the deterioration in him with dementia, how he was acting when you first realized it?
Yeah, it was awful. It was awful. It was, the hardest thing. I mean, look, people go through this in every walk of life. It's not just fighters who get dementia. So people get dementia everywhere. But, and so there are people who understand this, who know this, but it was very, very painful. And one of the early indicators is extreme paranoia. So when my father began accusing me and Chris of, trying to steal his money and trying to, there was no more loyal son than I was. And so that was really painful to go through that. He thought for years we had this fight about this lottery ticket that he thought he wanted. He thought he purchased a lottery ticket and it won, and he thought I took it, and he thought Chris took it. It was just it was a horrific time. But as hard as it is, you have to understand that people would tell me that's not your dad talking. You have to understand that. But the reality is, it was my dad talking, and he was talking it straight to me. telling me to go fuck myself and this.
Well, but it wasn't the real him at that point.
Yeah.
It wasn't even his. It wasn't his, even though he was saying the words. It wasn't his fault. The condition he was in.
Yeah, it was hard. It was really, really, really hard.
Thanks for sharing this, Sonia. Yeah, well, one of the people on this network, she's sharing this.
That's super nice.
So all right, I have a real mundane question, Bobby. Who would he say was the best guy was he ever fought?
If you asked him that, he would tell you Jimmy Dupree, because those were the toughest fights that he had. You know what's interesting about fighters? They will often pick a guy that they beat.
Never pick the guy that beat them. You're right. Yep.
Yeah, and so I've found that with a lot of fighters. On paper, it's got to be Louis Rodriguez, and my father would probably admit to that. But Jimmy Dupree was so good. And the interesting thing about Jimmy Dupree is they fought 3 times. 3 times, right? In 1973, 30 rounds, and each fight was a war. One fight was tougher than the next, and so he
were 1-1-1.
Yes,
one,
correct.
1-1.
They fought to a draw the first time. Dupree won the second one. My father won the third one. So he would always say Jimmy Dupree, even though probably on paper it's Louis Rodriguez.
I mean, you can make an argument that Don Fullman was a better fighter than Jimmy Dupree.
Yes.
A very good argument for that. Yeah, definitely. And there were a couple of other good wins over world title challenges like Tommy Hicks and Tom Bethea.
Yeah, that year
Hicks fought Bob Foster, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Right, and never got knocked down. Got stopped and clutched in 8 rounds against Foster.
Was your dad ever counted out, Bobby?
Yeah, a couple of, Ayumata was one, and Pete Toro fight early in his career was another time.
Did he beat Toro in a rematch or lose
lost the split decision in the rematch.
The rematch,
yeah. But yeah, I mean that
Isaac Logart, a pretty good fighter.
Isaac Logart was a #1 contender at one point. He beat Isaac Logart. Yeah, had over 100 wins in his career. My father that first year he became a light heavyweight. I think it was 72, the end of 72. He fought Bethea, Dupree, Hicks, Dupree, and Ayumata. So
wow.
So
that's Murderer's Row.
There's 6 fights against top 10 guys right there. So, the Bethea fight, he was a tough guy. Tom the Bomb.
Yep, he fought everybody too.
We basically run out of time. The one thing that we didn't mention, he was a great crowd pleaser, one of the more exciting fighters, of his era. Certainly we knew that in the New York area. That's why he was so popular, because he gave good value for people's money. Boxing is an entertainment business at the end of the day. And he never failed to entertain in his fights. I mean, rarely in a dull fight. Never in a dull fight, really.
Yeah,
okay, so get this book, Requiem for Middleweight, written by Bobby Cassidy Jr., about his dad, Bobby Cassidy Sr., but it's about you too, in an extent.
Some of the, at a certain point, I write it from the first person. Yeah.
Right. But it certainly has more than enough great boxing material here, and the human interest story added onto it. Great book, which I'd like to see them make some type of movie out of this. This is the type of book that has a movie in it, but just hopefully it somehow happens. Okay, so Bobby, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for coming on, Bob.
Yeah, great to see you guys. Really appreciate it. And thank you to your audience and all the messages they sent. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Thanks, Bobby.
Bye-bye.
So anyone can get this book. They got to go to Amazon here. Go to Amazon to pick this book up. Okay,
I like the redemption part, Jack. Well, I didn't know that he overcame all that. Again, I don't have the book yet, but I didn't know that he overcame all that. And that's a hell of a story.
It was a heck of a story, and what Bobby had to go through too, as being a loyal son. You want to be loyal to your dad. Okay, Frank, good show tonight. Bobby was a great guest.
Yep.
No big fights next weekend, just Clarissa Shields. We'll have a lot to talk about next week, because the the week after that, that weekend,
Romero.
Teofimo Lopez and Raleigh Romero. So we'll be able, and more boxing news is going to come out at that point. So see you next week, Frank.
Thanks for watching, everybody. See you later. See you, Jack.
Yeah.